They laughed at her accent until she opened the vault. Welcome to Tales by Orion. Let's uncover what really happened. The hushed, almost reverent silence of the Sterling Valerius archives was broken only by the faint, rhythmic swish of a cleaning cloth against polished mahogany and the distant, almost imperceptible hum of the climate control system. This was Alana Hayes's domain, a cavernous, subterranean vault filled with the accumulated history of a global financial empire. Rows upon rows of leather-bound ledgers, steel filing cabinets containing decades of sensitive documents, and, at its very heart, a massive, state-of-the-art titanium vault, a silent, imposing testament to the immense wealth and power of the corporation she served. At 47, Alana moved through this silent, ordered world with a quiet efficiency that rendered her almost invisible. Her uniform, a practical gray tunic and dark trousers, was impeccably clean, but it was also a cloak of anonymity, a uniform that rendered her unseen by the few high-level executives who occasionally descended into this hallowed space. She was a ghost in the periphery, her existence acknowledged only through the occasional curt nod or the dismissive wave of a hand. They rarely, if ever, saw the profound intelligence in her quiet, observant dark eyes, or the subtle weariness that went bone-deep from years of physically demanding labor. They certainly didn't know that Alana Hayes, the unassuming cleaning lady, possessed a mind that was as sharp, as analytical, as any of the high-powered executives who strode through these hushed corridors. Her passion lay not in cleaning, but in cryptography, in the intricate, beautiful, and often maddening art of codes and ciphers. She devoured books on the subject, her small, cramped apartment filled with texts on everything from ancient Skittles to the complex algorithms of modern digital encryption. It was a secret, solitary pursuit, a way of keeping her formidable intellect sharp, a quiet rebellion against the monotonous, soul-crushing drudgery of her daily life. But in this world, the world of Sterling Valerius, those pursuits were irrelevant. Here, her value was measured in the gleam of the marble floors, the dust-free surfaces of antique furniture, the pristine appearance of the archive's countless, often abused, amenities. She accepted her role with a quiet stoicism, a dignity that was born of necessity. Her family, a distant, struggling network in a country ravaged by economic downturn, depended on her meager earnings. Every floor she mopped, every shelf she dusted, every spill she meticulously cleaned, was a small, silent act of love, of duty, a contribution to a future she might never see, but for which she was fiercely, unwaveringly committed. She had once dreamed of a different life, of a career in academia, of becoming a professor of linguistics or mathematics, of contributing to the grand tapestry of human knowledge. But life, with its cruel, indifferent twists, had derailed those dreams. A family tragedy, a devastating economic collapse in her homeland, and the sudden, crushing weight of responsibility for aging parents and ailing younger siblings had forced her to trade her scholarly pursuits for a cleaning card, her intellectual ambitions for the practical realities of survival. So, she moved through the silent, ordered world of the Sterling Valerius archives, a silent cryptographer, charting the orbits of the privileged, her own star long since fallen, or so it seemed. She cleaned their messes, absorbed their casual cruelties and careless condescensions with a quiet resilience, her true self hidden beneath layers of practiced invisibility, a secret held close, like a precious, fragile fragment of starlight. Her days were a blur of aching muscles and the rhythmic hum of the floor polisher, her nights a quiet vigil of worn textbooks and murmured conversations with the distant voices of her family, their needs a constant, driving force. This particular evening, however, the hushed, orderly silence of the archives was shattered by a palpable, almost frantic energy. A crisis was unfolding, a crisis that would test the very foundations of the Sterling Valerius Empire, a crisis that would, against all odds, thrust Alana Hayes, the invisible cleaning lady, from the shadows into the harsh, unforgiving, and utterly unprepared light of the corporate spotlight. The source of the crisis was the massive titanium vault at the heart of the archives, a silent, imposing behemoth that held the company's most sensitive, most valuable, and most compromising documents. The vault, a marvel of modern security engineering, had, for reasons no one could yet comprehend, malfunctioned. Its complex, multi-layered electronic locking mechanism, designed by a team of brilliant and now, mysteriously, unavailable German engineers, had frozen, refusing to respond to any of the usual access codes, a silent, metallic act of defiance that had sent a ripple of pure, unadulterated terror through the highest echelons of Sterling Valerius. Inside that vault lay the original, hard-copy documents pertaining to a series of highly sensitive and highly lucrative international mergers, documents that were urgently required for a critical, time-sensitive audit by a team of notoriously unforgiving federal regulators, who were due to arrive in less than 24 hours. Failure to produce these documents would result in catastrophic financial penalties, a devastating blow to the company's reputation, and perhaps even criminal charges for its top executives. At the center of this storm of escalating panic stood Julian Thorne, the formidable CEO of Sterling Valerius, a man whose icy composure was, for the first time in his long, storied career, beginning to show visible cracks. He paced before the silent, unyielding vault, his face a mask of controlled fury, his steel-gray eyes burning with a mixture of disbelief and a dawning, terrifying sense of powerlessness. He had summoned his best and brightest, his head of security, a former intelligence operative named Henderson, his chief technology officer, a young, brilliant, but now visibly sweating wunderkind named Miller, a team of elite, high-priced security consultants, all of whom now stood before the vault, their faces a mixture of professional bafflement and a growing, palpable fear. "Well," Thorne roared, his voice, usually so controlled, now tinged with a raw, uncharacteristic edge of desperation. "What is it? What's the problem? I pay you people millions of dollars to ensure that this glorified tin can is impenetrable from the outside and seamlessly accessible from the inside. And now, you tell me you can't even open it?" Henderson, a burly man whose usual air of quiet, lethal competence had deserted him, wrung his hands. "Sir," he began, his voice strained, "we've tried everything. The electronic keypad is unresponsive. The biometric scanners are offline. The manual override, a series of complex sequential codes, is also failing. It's as if the entire system has gone to sleep. Or died." Miller, the CTO, chimed in, his voice a nervous squeak. "It's the German encryption, sir. It's a masterpiece of digital security. A labyrinth, they called it. A self-contained, self-correcting algorithm that, in the event of any perceived external tampering, initiates a total system lockdown. We can't bypass it. We can't crack it. We are, for all intents and purposes, locked out of our own vault. Unacceptable," Thorne thundered, his voice echoing through the silent, cavernous archives. "There must be a way. A backdoor, a failsafe. Contact the German engineers. Get them on a plane. Now." Miller paled. "We've tried, sir. The lead engineer, he passed away last year. And his team, they are bound by a non-disclosure agreement, so ironclad it would take a team of international lawyers a decade to unravel. They will not speak to us. They will not help us." The silence that followed was profound, heavy with the weight of impending doom. The federal regulators were coming. The documents were inaccessible, and the clock was ticking, each second a hammer blow against the crumbling foundations of the Sterling Valerius empire. It was in this atmosphere of escalating despair that Alana Hayes, who had been quietly, discreetly, cleaning a nearby bank of filing cabinets, her presence so unobtrusive that the panicked executives had barely registered her, made a small, almost imperceptible sound. It was a faint, almost involuntary tsk of her tongue, a sound of quiet, almost academic, disapproval, the sound a scholar might make upon discovering a flawed argument, a logical fallacy, in a dense, academic text. The sound, though barely audible, was so out of place in the tense, high-stakes drama unfolding before the vault that it snagged Julian Thorne's attention. He whirled on her, his eyes blazing, his frustration, his desperation, needing a target, an outlet, for its immense, unvented pressure. "And what was that, Cleaner?" Thorne snarled, his voice dripping with a contemptuous, almost feral rage. "Do you have something to contribute to this corporate catastrophe? Do you perhaps have a secret key in your cleaning cart? A magical formula to unlock a multi-million-dollar titanium vault that has baffled the best security minds in the business?" He was mocking her, belittling her, using her as a release valve for his own terrifying sense of failure. He expected her to shrink, to stammer an apology, to retreat into the shadows of her accustomed invisibility. But Alana Hayes did not shrink. She did not stammer. Instead, she straightened her slightly stooped shoulders, her quiet, observant dark eyes meeting his, a flicker of something he had never seen in her before, a quiet, unwavering, and utterly unnerving confidence in their depths. "Perhaps, Mr. Thorne," she said, her voice quiet but firm, carrying effortlessly through the silent, astonished archives, her English tinged with a faint, almost musical, accent that the panicked executives had never before noticed. "Perhaps, Ido." The sheer, unadulterated audacity of Alana Hayes's quiet pronouncement, "Perhaps, I do," hung in the sterile, climate-controlled air of the Sterling Valerius archives like a live, sparking wire. The assembled team of high-powered executives and security consultants, who had been on the verge of a collective corporate meltdown, stared at her, their faces a mixture of stunned disbelief, open-mouthed astonishment, and a dawning, almost superstitious awe. Julian Thorne himself, his initial rage momentarily eclipsed by a profound, almost dizzying sense of disorientation, found himself, for a rare, fleeting moment, utterly speechless. This was not merely a breach of protocol. This was a shattering of the very fabric of his carefully ordered reality. The cleaner, the invisible, silent, unassuming cleaner, was claiming she could succeed where his entire, multi-million-dollar team of experts had failed. What did you say?" Thorne finally managed, his voice a low, incredulous whisper, his usual commanding resonance utterly gone. You think you can open this vault?" Alana met his gaze, her own dark eyes holding a quiet, unwavering conviction. "I believe so, Mr. Thorne," she replied, her voice still calm, steady, a stark contrast to the frantic, panicked energy that had been ricocheting around the room just moments before. "The Labyrinth encryption system, as your CTO so aptly described it, it is not just a digital algorithm. It is a linguistic puzzle, a cipher based on a rather obscure, early 20th century German philosophical text. Its primary architect, the late Herr Müller, was not just an engineer. He was a scholar, a philosopher, a man who believed that true security lay not in brute force, but in intellectual elegance." The executives stared at her, their faces now a comical tableau of utter, profound bewilderment. Henderson, the ex-intelligence operative, looked as though he had just seen a ghost. Miller, the brilliant young CTO, looked as though he was about to faint. And Thorne looked at Alana, a new, almost fearful, respect dawning in his icy gray eyes. How could you possibly know this?" Thorne whispered, his voice hoarse. "This is highly classified information, known only to a handful of individuals within the German engineering firm." Alana allowed a faint, almost imperceptible smile to touch her lips, a smile that was not of triumph, but of a quiet, hard-won, intellectual satisfaction. "I read, Mr. Thorne," she said simply. "I study. I have a particular interest in cryptography and in German philosophy. The work of Herr Müller, his unique fusion of engineering and existentialism, has been a personal fascination of mine for many years. I recognize the patterns in the system's error codes, the subtle linguistic clues in its diagnostic reports. They are not random, sir. They are a message, a key, a riddle, if you will. And I believe, she paused, her gaze unwavering. I believe I know the answer. The silence that followed was profound, heavy with the weight of a dawning, almost terrifying comprehension. This woman, this cleaner, this invisible, silent servant, possessed a mind, an intellect, a depth of knowledge that surpassed that of his entire, high-powered, and astronomically expensive team. The irony was so profound, so devastatingly perfect, that it almost made him want to laugh or weep. And this riddle, Mademoiselle Hayes, Thorne said finally, his voice now a low, almost humble, murmur, a tone no one in that room had ever heard him use before. You believe you can solve it? I believe I can try, Mr. Thorne, Alana replied, her voice quiet but firm. But it will require a certain focus, a certain silence, and perhaps, she added, a flicker of something almost mischievous in her dark eyes, a bit less of the frantic, dissonant energy that is currently filling this room. The labyrinth that does not respond well to panic. Thorne stared at her for a long moment, his mind reeling, his carefully constructed world tilting on its axis. He looked at his team of defeated, bewildered experts. He looked at the silent, imposing, and seemingly impenetrable titanium vault. And he looked at Alana Hayes, the unassuming cleaning lady, the woman who had, in the space of a few, quiet, terrifyingly intelligent sentences, become his last, his only, and his most profoundly improbable hope. He made a decision that defied all logic, all protocol, all the ingrained prejudices of his entire corporate existence. Very well, Mademoiselle Hayes, Thorne said, his voice ringing with a new, almost desperate authority. The vault is yours. The rest of you, he gestured dismissively to his stunned, and now deeply humbled, executive team, out. All of you. Now, give the lady the silence she requires. The executives, their faces a mixture of relief, humiliation, and a dawning, almost fearful, awe, scrambled to obey, their usual arrogant swagger replaced by a hasty, almost comical retreat. Thorne himself remained, a silent, solitary, and profoundly, unexpectedly, hopeful witness to the strange, surreal, and utterly captivating drama that was about to unfold. The fate of his empire, it seemed, now rested not in the hands of his high-powered strategists, but in the quiet, unassuming, and suddenly, terrifyingly powerful hands of his cleaning lady. The vast, subterranean archive, now empty of its panicked, high-powered executives, fell into a profound, almost sacred silence. The only sounds were the faint, almost imperceptible hum of the climate control system and the steady, rhythmic beat of Alana Hayes' own, surprisingly calm, heart. Julian Thorne stood a respectful distance away, a silent, almost invisible observer, his usual commanding presence now muted, replaced by a tense, almost palpable anticipation. He watched, fascinated, as Alana approached the massive titanium vault, not with the frantic urgency of his security consultants, but with a quiet, almost reverent deliberation. She did not immediately touch the unresponsive keypad. She did not try to force the silent, biometric scanners. Instead, she stood before the immense, imposing door for a long moment, her eyes closed, her head tilted slightly, as if she were listening. Listening not with her ears, but with her entire being, attuning herself to the subtle, almost imperceptible, resonant frequency of the silent, sleeping machine. Then she opened her eyes, a new, quiet confidence shining in their dark depths. She turned to Thorne, a faint, almost apologetic smile playing on her lips. Mr. Thorne, she began, her voice a low, almost conspiratorial whisper, the labyrinth, it is a beautiful, elegant system, but it is also profoundly and deliberately stubborn. It has been designed to resist brute force, to reject conventional logic. To open it, one must not command it. One must persuade it. One must speak its language. Thorne, utterly out of his depth, simply nodded, a silent, almost humble gesture of acquiescence. He was a man accustomed to command, to control, to a world that bent to his will. The idea of persuading a titanium vault was utterly alien to his worldview. Yet he found himself, to his own profound astonishment, utterly, completely captivated by this strange, brilliant, and deeply, deeply enigmatic woman. Alana then turned her attention to the vault's electronic keypad, its screen dark, lifeless. She did not try to enter a numerical code. Instead, she began to tap a series of seemingly random keys, her fingers moving with a light, almost musical grace. It was not a code. It was a rhythm, a cadence, a silent, percussive melody. Thorn, watching her, felt a strange, almost dizzying sense of disorientation. This was not cryptography as he understood it. This was something else entirely, something that bordered on magic. After a few moments of this strange, rhythmic tapping, the keypad, which had been utterly unresponsive for hours, flickered to life. A single cryptic phrase in elegant, archaic German script appeared on the screen. Der Abgrund schaut auch in dich hinein. The abyss also gazes into you. The phrase, a direct quote from the very philosophical text Alana had identified as the core of the labyrinth's encryption, sent a fresh wave of awe and a new, almost superstitious fear through Thorn. This was not a guess. This was not a lucky break. This was a profound, almost mystical understanding of the system's very soul. Alana, however, seemed entirely unfazed. She simply nodded, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching her lips. She then turned her attention to the biometric scanner, a small, circular plate of polished steel that had refused to read the fingerprints of even the highest-ranking executives. She did not place her own hand upon it. Instead, she reached into the pocket of her gray tunic and produced a small, worn, leather-bound book, the very volume of German philosophy that held the key to the labyrinth's secrets. She opened it to a specific page, a page she had clearly marked, and gently, reverently pressed the open page against the scanner. For a long, heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. Thorn held his breath, a knot of tension tightening in his gut. Had she been wrong? Was this all some elaborate, fantastical delusion? Then a soft, almost musical chime echoed through the silent archives. A small, green light on the scanner began to pulse, a steady, rhythmic beat like a slow, awakening heart. Alana then moved to the final, most archaic element of the vault's security system, a series of 6 heavy, brass tumblers, each etched with a complex array of symbols, a manual override that had resisted all attempts at forced entry. She did not try to turn them individually. Instead, she began to hum, a low, resonant, almost hypnotic melody, a tune that seemed to vibrate in the very air of the room, a tune that resonated with a strange, almost primal power. As she hummed, she began to turn the tumblers, not one at a time, but in a specific, intricate sequence, her hands moving with a fluid, almost balletic grace, her movements perfectly synchronized with the rhythm of her humming, with the pulsing green light of the scanner, with the very heartbeat of the silent, sleeping machine. It was a symphony of touch, of sound, of a profound, intuitive, and almost terrifying connection between a woman and a machine, a connection that defied all conventional logic, all rational explanation. Thorn watched, his heart pounding, his mind reeling, a silent, humbled witness to an act of pure, unadulterated genius. He was no longer just a CEO watching an employee. He was a layman in the presence of a high priestess, a neophyte observing a sacred, ancient ritual, a man of mere power in the presence of true, profound, and utterly, terrifyingly beautiful magic. The final tumbler clicked into place. The humming ceased. The pulsing green light held steady. And then, with a soft, almost sighing release of pneumatic pressure, a sound that seemed to echo with the weight of decades of silence, the massive, 2-ton titanium door of the Sterling Valerius vault began to swing open, revealing the dark, secret heart of the Empire, a heart that had, against all odds, been unlocked not by power, not by force, but by the quiet, unassuming, and utterly magnificent genius of the cleaning lady. The silence that followed the opening of the vault was profound, broken only by the faint, almost imperceptible hiss of the equalizing air pressure and the frantic, disbelieving thumping of Julian Thorne's own heart. He stared into the dark, cavernous interior of the vault, at the rows upon rows of neatly stacked files, of leather-bound ledgers, of the accumulated secrets of his vast, global empire. And then he looked at Alana Hayes, the unassuming cleaning lady who stood, calm and composed, before the open maw of his corporate soul. The contrast was so stark, so utterly, profoundly surreal, that he felt a wave of dizziness wash over him. "How?" he whispered, his voice a hoarse, incredulous rasp. "How in God's name did you do that?" Alana turned to him, a faint, almost weary smile playing on her lips. "I told you, Mr. Thorne," she said softly, her voice still quiet, but now imbued with a new, unwavering confidence. "I listened. The vault, it did not want to be forced. It wanted to be understood. It wanted someone to speak its language. A language of patterns, of resonance, of a shared, underlying philosophical truth." Philosophical truth. The words seemed to mock him, to underscore the profound, almost comical, inadequacy of his own, purely transactional worldview. He, Julian Thorne, the master of a global financial empire, the man who had built his life on the cold, hard, irrefutable logic of numbers, had just been saved by a woman who had, in essence, had a philosophical conversation with his high-tech security system. The irony was as bitter as it was undeniable. He thought of his team of high-powered, six-figure salaried experts, with their complex algorithms, their brute force hacking attempts, their utter and ultimately humiliating failure. And he looked at Alana, at her simple gray uniform, at her calloused hands, at the quiet, profound intelligence that shone in her dark, observant eyes. He had dismissed her, overlooked her, treated her as a mere functionary, an invisible, interchangeable part of the machinery of his life. And she had, in turn, saved him, saved his company, saved his empire. A new, unfamiliar, and deeply, deeply unsettling emotion began to stir within him. It was an emotion that went beyond mere gratitude, beyond professional admiration. It was humility, a profound, gut-wrenching, and utterly, terrifyingly transformative humility. He, Julian Thorne, the man who had always been the smartest, the most ruthless, the most powerful man in any room he entered, now found himself in the presence of a mind, an intellect, a wisdom that was so far beyond his own, it was almost incomprehensible. And that mind, that intellect, that wisdom belonged to his cleaning lady. "The documents, Mr. Thorne," Alana said, her voice gently, almost kindly, pulling him back from the brink of his internal, existential crisis. "The ones you require for the federal regulators. I believe they are in the third section on the left. The leather-bound ledgers with the gold leaf embossing." She gestured towards a specific row of shelves within the vault, her knowledge of its contents as precise, as unnerving, as her understanding of its locking mechanism. Thorne, still reeling, could only nod. He watched as she walked into the vault, her movements sure, confident, as if she belonged there, as if this silent, secret heart of his empire was her natural domain. She retrieved the required ledgers, her touch gentle, respectful, and brought them to him, placing them on a nearby table. "There," she said simply. "I believe that is what you were looking for." The federal regulators, when they arrived the next morning, were met with a scene of calm, professional efficiency. The required documents were all present, all in order, their audit proceeding with a smoothness that was a testament to the seamless, well-oiled machinery of Sterling Valerius Industries. No one, of course, knew of the frantic, desperate, and ultimately miraculous events of the preceding night. No one knew that the fate of the entire corporation had rested, for a few heart-stopping hours, in the quiet, capable hands of an unassuming cleaning lady. After the regulators had departed, their audit successfully and uneventfully concluded, Julian Thorne summoned Alana Hayes to his office. The office, usually so cold, so sterile, so intimidating, now felt different. Softer, more human. Thorne himself seemed changed, his usual icy composure replaced by a new, almost raw, vulnerability. Alana, he began, his voice low, his use of her first name a quiet acknowledgement of the profound shift in their relationship. I owe you a debt that I can never truly repay. You have not just saved my company. You have saved me. From my own arrogance, my own blindness. He paused, his gaze fixed on her, his eyes, those usually icy, impenetrable pools, now holding a new, unfamiliar, and deeply, deeply unsettling humility. I've spent my life acquiring things, Alana, he continued, his voice thick with an emotion he no longer tried to suppress. Companies, assets, power. But I realize now, been profoundly and devastatingly poor. Poor in spirit, poor in understanding, poor in the things that truly matter. He walked towards her, his movements no longer those of a powerful CO addressing a subordinate, but of a man, a humble, grateful man, acknowledging a profound, life-altering truth. I want you to stay, Alana, he said, his voice a ragged whisper. Not as a cleaner, not as a consultant, but as my partner, my advisor, my conscience. I need you, Alana. I need your wisdom, your integrity, your ability to hear the unspoken, to see the unseen. I need you to help me, to help Sterling Valerius, to become something more than just a soulless, profit-driven machine. I need you to help me find its heart, its soul. Alana stared at him, tears welling in her own eyes, a wave of profound, overwhelming emotion washing over her. A partner, an advisor, a conscience. It was a role so far beyond anything she had ever dared to imagine, a responsibility so profound, so meaningful, that it stole her breath. Mr. Thorne, she whispered, her voice trembling, I don't know what to say. Say yes, Alana. Julian Thorne replied, his own voice now a ragged whisper, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching his lips. Say yes, and help me learn how to be a good man. And in that moment, in that vast, opulent office high above the indifferent city, two solitary souls, a billionaire and a cleaner, a cynic and a scholar, a man of immense power and a woman of profound wisdom, found in each other not just a solution to a corporate crisis, but a profound, unexpected, and deeply, beautifully human redemption. The cleaning lady had not just unlocked a vault. She had, with her quiet intelligence, her profound integrity, her unwavering belief in the power of the human spirit, unlocked the very heart of a man, and of an empire that had for too long remained cold, dark, and impenetrably closed. The transformation of Sterling Valerius Industries under the quiet, profound, and utterly revolutionary influence of Alana Hayes was not a sudden, dramatic upheaval, but a slow, steady, and deeply, deeply meaningful evolution. It was a shift not in policy, but in philosophy, a recalibration of the very soul of the corporation, a journey from a purely profit-driven, data-obsessed machine to a more human-centric, ethically grounded, and ultimately more resilient and more successful enterprise. Alana, in her new and initially rather ill-defined role as senior advisor for corporate integrity and human systems, became the quiet, unassuming heart of this transformation. She did not attend board meetings in the traditional sense, did not issue directives, did not engage in the usual power plays and political maneuvering of the corporate world. Instead, she listened. She observed. She moved, as she always had, through the hushed corridors, the bustling open-plan offices, the sterile laboratories of Sterling Valerius, her presence a quiet, calming, and profoundly insightful force. She spoke with the engineers, the researchers, the marketers, the administrative assistants, the cleaning staff, hearing their stories, understanding their struggles, their frustrations, their hopes, their dreams. She had a unique, almost uncanny ability to see the hidden patterns, the unspoken dissonances, the subtle, often overlooked human elements that were so often the true root of corporate inefficiency, of employee disengagement, of systemic failure. She brought these insights, these quiet, profound truths, to Julian Thorne, not in the form of sterile, data-driven reports, but in the form of stories. Stories of individual human beings, of their passions, their talents, their quiet, often unrecognized contributions to the vast, complex ecosystem of the corporation. And Thorne, for the first time in his long, storied career, began to listen. Truly listen. He learned to see his employees not as human resources, as cogs in a machine, but as people, as individuals with unique gifts, with unique perspectives, with a profound, often untapped, potential to contribute to the greater good of the organization. He and Alana, working together, began to implement a series of radical and initially deeply resisted changes. They dismantled the rigid, top-down, command and control structure of the corporation, replacing it with a more collaborative, more transparent, more human model. They instituted programs that fostered creativity, that rewarded integrity, that prioritized employee well-being, that celebrated unconventional thinking, that created pathways for hidden talents, like Alana's own, to be discovered, to be nurtured, to be valued. They established the Mueller-Hayes Institute for Cryptographic and Philosophical Studies, a quirky and surprisingly influential internal think tank dedicated to exploring the intersection of technology, ethics, and humanism, a testament to the strange, beautiful, and profoundly transformative fusion of Alana's and the late Mueller's brilliant, unconventional minds. The corporate world watched in bewildered astonishment as Sterling Valerius, once a bastion of ruthless, cutthroat capitalism, began to evolve into something different, something more compassionate, something more soulful. The initial reaction from Wall Street was one of skepticism, of derision. Thorne, they whispered, had gone soft, had lost his edge, had been bewitched by some strange, mystical, cleaning lady-turned-corporate guru. But then, the numbers began to tell a different story. Employee retention soared. Innovation skyrocketed. Productivity, paradoxically, increased. And profits, once stagnant, began to climb steadily, a natural consequence of a thriving, engaged, and deeply, genuinely motivated workforce. Julian Thorne, once a feared, almost universally disliked figure in the global financial community, began to be seen as a visionary leader, a pioneer of a new, more sustainable, and ultimately more human model of corporate success. He gave interviews, not about hostile takeovers or market domination, but about the profound importance of listening to the quiet voices, of seeing the unseen, of investing in the humanity of your enterprise. He spoke with genuine humility of his own journey, of the lessons he had learned from a woman who had, with her quiet wisdom, her profound integrity, her unwavering belief in the power of the human spirit, unlocked not just a vault, but his own long-closed heart. Alana, of course, remained his quiet, unassuming partner, his eminence grise, his moral compass. She never sought the spotlight, never courted fame, her power always rooted in her quiet dignity, her profound humility, her unwavering commitment to serving others. Her family, now secure, now thriving, remained her anchor, her quiet connection to the world beyond the rarefied atmosphere of corporate power. She still read her books on cryptography, on philosophy, on art history, her mind still hungry for knowledge, for understanding, for the quiet, profound truths that lay hidden beneath the surface of things. One cool autumn evening, years after their first fateful encounter in the Sterling Valerius archives, Alana stood with Julian Thorne on the terrace of a small, beautiful, and surprisingly humble community library, a library the Sterling Valerius Foundation had helped to build in a struggling, inner-city neighborhood. The air was filled with the sounds of children's laughter, with the scent of old books, with the quiet, vibrant hum of a community in the process of healing, of learning, of finding its own collective voice. They stood together in the fading light, two solitary souls who had, through the strangest, most improbable of circumstances, found in each other a partner, a friend, a kindred spirit. They had, in their own unique and profoundly human ways, saved each other. "Do you ever miss it, Alana?" Julian asked suddenly, his voice a low, resonant rumble, his gaze fixed on the distant, setting sun. "Miss what, Julian?" Alana replied, her own voice calm, steady, a quiet smile playing on her lips. "The grandeur metropolitan," he said, a faint, almost wistful, humor in his tone. "The polished floors? The hushed corridors? The blissful anonymity?" Alana was silent for a long moment, her dark, wise eyes reflecting the fiery colors of the sunset. "Sometimes," she admitted finally, her voice barely a whisper, "sometimes I miss the simplicity, the quiet, the illusion of a life where the most pressing concern was the perfect, streak-free shine on a boardroom window." She paused, then turned to look at him, her gaze direct, unwavering, filled with a profound, unspoken, and utterly mutual affection. "But I would not trade this, Julian. This is a far more beautiful and far more meaningful shine." Julian met her gaze, his own icy blue eyes, once so cold, now filled with a new, unfamiliar warmth, a deep, abiding, and profoundly human peace. "Nor I, Alana," he said softly. "Nor I." They stood together in the gathering dusk, two unlikely companions, their pasts a tapestry of shadows and secrets, their futures an unwritten, yet now deeply, beautifully, hopeful landscape. They had both been changed irrevocably by their encounter, by the dangerous, exhilarating, and ultimately redemptive journey they had shared. They were survivors. They were warriors. They were partners. And as the first stars began to prick the darkening velvet of the urban sky, Alastair Sterling and Alana Hayes, the billionaire and the cleaner, the cynic and the scholar, raised their imaginary glasses in a silent, solitary toast. To second chances, to quiet revolutions, to the enduring, indomitable, and often profoundly surprising power of the human spirit. And perhaps, just perhaps, to the faint, flickering but never entirely extinguished hope that even in the darkest, most compromised of worlds, true and lasting, change is always, always possible.